Please join me in welcoming Virginia Madsen. So great to have you here. The festival is great, the people are great, and so many of your performances are so great. And before we launch into so many that we have to talk about, I just want to say that one of the most popular clips on YouTube is from Sideways, and your character Maya talking to Paul Giamatti's Miles, and you're talking about the life of wine. And there's that phenomenal moment when, yes, please, when Maya says, you know, talking about wine, you're like thinking about what's going on the year the grapes were growing, how the wine continues to evolve, and how a bottle of wine is constantly evolving and gaining complexity. And I feel like that about a lot of your performances as well. Let's talk about the beginnings, though, and growing up in Chicago, and your first inklings of being an actress, and what made you want to pursue this career?
Well, it was all I ever wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was a performer probably by the time I was crawling.
Yeah.
I just, I had the acting bug, and so did my brother and my older sister.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't want to pursue.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't want to pursue it as a career.
Yeah.
And my brother didn't think that was what was expected of him
Mm-hmm.
as the son of a fireman.
Yeah.
And I think my dad, I think he thought it was a hobby.
Mm.
But I was very, very passionate about it from a young age, and thankfully our mother recognized that I had something special.
Yeah. In fact,
she encouraged me.
Yeah. In fact, I read that you used to come back from movies telling her the plots of everything and doing all of the lines, right, and doing all the characters. Is that right?
Well, it's kind of an embarrassment now, but I was obviously, you know, I think I was a very passionate young person, and so if I went to see a movie, I would take, if the movie was 90 minutes long, I would take 90 minutes to act out the entire film. And my mother was so patient. She was like, well, that sounds really amazing. And I was like, but wait, then this happened, and then that happened. And then she said, you know. But she knew that I had a great love for film.
Yeah.
And I didn't do very much theater. Mm-hmm. I just loved movies. Mm-hmm. I loved the magic that I thought went on when they made it. And so I studied it anytime I could on a little black and white TV.
Right. In fact, you and I were talking the other day about how one of the ways you kind of learned to read as a really young kid was watching silent films, black and white silent films on the TV, right?
Well, I was a night owl.
Mm-hmm.
I had a real problem sleeping as a child into most of my adult life. Until then you have a child and they kind of beat that out of you because you're just so exhausted. But my mom would let me stay up, and on Sunday nights they would show on PBS, they would show a silent film. And she thought, well, it'll be good for her because she's learning how to read. Yeah. It was not good Monday morning going to school. I always had an excuse why I couldn't go. Yeah. But it was that world of cinema, that beautiful world in black and white and Art Deco sets and highly dramatic performances. Yeah. Also then led me into the classic monster movies. Yeah. And I just thought, those actors, and I would read about them. I'd go to the library and I would find anything that I could about Bela Lugosi and Lon Chaney, and I was fascinated by the lighting and the makeup, and so it I was just voracious. Anything that I could find out about cinema, I was into.
Yeah, I love that you love the Universal horror films. Like they're such great films, and they're also, but
they're very romantic and tragic, and
yeah, and they're very lush, and there's lots of acting going on in them, and really beautiful acting as well. I agree.
Well, and also, remember that these were innovators.
Yeah, that's right.
They were experimental filmmakers. From the silent films where nobody really knew what they were doing, but they were doing this strange and wonderful thing, and people would go into, like they do today. They'd go, they go into a dark movie theater and are taken away with storytelling. And I wanted in. I wanted to do that.
Yeah. We'll talk more about your mom's influence in a little bit, because she went on to become an Emmy Award-winning producer, and you guys did a documentary together. But there's something about the quote that she gave to you, or something that she said to you, that she said she raised you and Michael with the idea that you should always live your lives out of step. And I really love that. And I think that there's almost no better advice for a performer or an artist than to live your life out of step, because it really sort of says, follow your path, follow your dreams, right?
Well, it's also a little bit of a cautionary tale. I mean, if you're going to live your life out of step, you're going to trip and fall at some point. And she also told me that, like, if you're, beware, be careful of that when you move to Hollywood. She would also say, there's plenty of people that would love to help you lose your way. And so I tried to be as thoughtful and careful as I could, but with her as a guide, she was is a very strong force in my life and a mentor, and she's just an extraordinary woman, my mother. So she taught me well, and I didn't follow her advice a lot of times.
That's what parental advice is, to sometimes take, sometimes to not take, as the case.
She was right. She was right.
Well, in the early 1980s, then you moved from Chicago to Los Angeles and made your mark in a lot of movies, including a couple that I really love, including Electric Dreams, which the LA Times called you alluring and intelligent in, and Creator. They did. And Creator with Peter O'Toole, another sort of favorite of mine from that era. What did you learn early on from those films and some of those collaborations that you carried with you into your career? Lessons from that time.
Well, I was very fortunate, because my first big movie was Dune, and I really didn't have much to do except for a monologue, and got to watch all these extraordinary actors and a gigantic film set and the genius of David Lynch. And then, I just kept going on to these amazing adventures. And Electric Dreams, we were on location in San Francisco, then we shot in London, and I was living my dream. And it didn't stay that fantastic for a long time, but it was a great way to begin. And I learned so much, because, as I was saying before, I was just voracious I wanted to learn everything that I could about what all those different people were doing on the set. And this was a time where everyone saw the rushes or the dailies, which is, at the end of the day, the film cans would come back and they would screen what we'd shot the day or two before. And everyone would go, and I thought, oh, well, this is the way it is. So, and that was great, because then I never, hated watching myself, because I thought, oh, this is part of the process. You're supposed to watch. But that was the time that I could, that's what the lighting was, because I don't understand lighting. I've never, ever been able to figure that out. But I could see, that's why that light was coming through the window like that. And also the dailies were a time when the film still belonged to us, to the family. And before it was color corrected, before studio heads got their hands on it, before it was edited. We just got to see what we did and watch it, with great enthusiasm, or, oh, we're gonna have to reshoot that. All right. But it was all part of my learning,
Yeah.
so I drank it in as much as I could.
Yeah, such a terrific time to come of age in Hollywood, because there's so many edgy films going on, and by even watching, as you did, the editing things in the editing room and the rushes, did you modulate your performances to learn how to kind of hit certain beats in different ways by watching things behind the scenes like that? Because I would imagine as an actor that's a great lesson to learn. Say, oh, there's a pacing to this that I need to maybe adapt in some ways.
That was very rare
Yeah.
for me, because I like working very closely with my director, and so it was always more about watching other people's work and watching, like, the one thing I would adjust is I would say, oh, that's the world my character lives in. That's what the light looks like. That's what the sunset looks like. Yeah. So I would use what I was seeing to just broaden or make the performance more complex. But I left it to the director to tell me if I should adjust things.
Yeah, yeah.
You know.
Well, speaking of directors, it wasn't much later that you began working with some top-tier filmmakers. You mentioned David Lynch, of course, and soon there was Rob Reiner. In the first of 2 times you collaborated with him, Francis Coppola, and your character in The Rainmaker is phenomenal. There's a moment in that film when the film is going on and you come into it about 45 minutes later and it goes in a whole other direction and becomes so terrific and so gripping. Robert Altman in his final film, and Dennis Hopper. I'm wondering how watching these top-caliber directors maybe modulate your approach to film and performance. Did you kind of learn things from working with them?
You should.
Yeah.
You should learn as much as you can, good or bad, but always be curious and always try and develop something new.
Yeah.
Because that's sort of the nature of our business.
Yeah.
And because I could never, it's not in my nature to be stagnant.
Yeah.
Or to phone it in. And because, man, I've made some stinkers, and you know, sometimes you get a script and you're like, oh, you know, how am I going to make that work? Well, that's a lesson too.
Yeah.
You know, how am I going to make? Oh God, how am I going to make that dialogue sound like it's well written? And I do my best, because my mother's a writer, and I know how difficult it is to do that,
Yeah.
and something that I'm not good at. I'm good as a script doctor. I lack the discipline to write an entire script, but I try to bring. That's my job.
Yeah.
My job is to interpret. My job is to make it better than it is,
Yeah.
if I can.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm their voice.
Yeah.
So from each one of those directors, even sometimes the ones that weren't really great, you know, I would learn something from that too, because I was like, oh, I'm on my own.
Yeah.
There's no one giving me any direction here, right. So I'm gonna have to buckle up and see what I can make of this.
Right.
And then sometimes as a young person, there would be a director that would just think that everything I was doing was incredible. And so I'd be like, yes. And he'd like, yes, do more. And so I would do more. And I would cry and scream and, oh my God, and I would just be amazed at myself after, you know, like, oh, what an incredible day. And then I would see the film and just go, is anyone going to say that? You know? And so that's also part of your learning.
Yeah.
That's a part of your learning, because that's an ego trip that you can get on. But overacting felt really good.
Well, it's like we were talking about the Universal horror films. Like there's sort of that, there's a bigness to that and a bigness to those performances. Well, one of the things that I love about your performance in The Rainmaker, just to pick that one, is because there's so much banked emotion going on. And there's a scene in a motel room with yourself and Matt Damon and Danny DeVito, and it's a scene when there's a lot of there's a lot of emotion going on, and there's a lot of story being given. There's a lot of sort of script beats being given, but you are keeping it sort of all inside and letting it out in little small gradations. It's a beautifully modulated performance. I'm wondering if, as you're reading the script and looking at that, you're sort of seeing those emotions and how to hit those beats in sort of gentle ways.
You know, I think that that's probably the first time that I learned how to do very little, because the actors that I admire the most, and I think the performances that we can really feel, is that you can feel an actor listening, not just waiting for their lines, but you can see the wheels turning, and he just wanted me to be really, really simple and to just listen, both Matt and I. And so, you know, there was a lot of dialogue and a long, long story. So we did that scene. And then Coppola got behind the camera, and I don't even know when he was rolling, but he said, "I want to tell you a story." And he told me the story of Zoetrope and what happened to his company when it was taken from him. And I didn't know anything about that. So I just sat there. This is a legend to me. I mean, Francis Ford Coppola is like, I kept thinking I was going to get fired.
Right.
I couldn't believe that, and he was my director. I mean, it could make me cry now, because I learned so much about acting from him. And it was a time when nobody wanted to hire me. And my career had really tanked. But there was something about me that he saw something in me. And so when someone believes in you like that, who's a legend, it did a lot for me. It did a lot for me personally. And now he's sitting behind the camera as it's rolling, and he's telling me his life story. So I think I was so fascinated. That's how he got that stillness out of me. And I think that's the first time I ever did that.
Wow, I love that. You know, so much of your style reminds me, it's a very old-fashioned style. When you said about listening, it almost reminds me of what Spencer Tracy used to talk about like the key to acting is listening, sort of just making sure that you're there and listening. And so much of your style reminds me of that in some ways. That's interesting. In 2004, then, comes Alexander Payne's Oscar-nominated Sideways, which is an absolute modern classic, and in which your work earned you an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actress, a Golden Globe nomination. You won the Independent Spirit Award, the LA Film Critics Award, the New York Film Critics Circle Award, and numerous other critics groups awards, too many for me to name, in fact. You've said that an important part of playing Maya in Sideways is that you didn't put on a character, but that you kind of opened up to her, essentially finding her in you. How did you find her in you? What were some of the keys to Maya?
Well, this was another one of those times where I wasn't getting hired. I don't know, I'd been around too long, and You showed them. I mean, And again, he saw something in me. But I was in a very positive, fertile place in my life. I had come out of sort of a long period of time where I was depressed, and you know, my kid was 5 years old, and I still looked like I was pregnant. And I got into this place of, you know, eating pizza and smoking and just kind of watching TV a lot, and because I was exhausted and depressed. And my family and my friends didn't really find this entertaining anymore, and started to say, listen, man, you got to do something. You've got to get off the couch. You have to do something. I'm going to help you. And I had a lot of support, but I started listening. And, you know, I had a friend of mine who's like, I also had a neck injury because I was so out of shape that I fell a couple of times. I wasn't drunk. But I fell a couple of times because my body just wasn't working well. So this person took me to Pilates. This person made a great meal for me. My mother scolded me, and I just started to come out of this place that I think the character Maya had been in. So I started, when I was on the treadmill, I started saying I wasn't on the treadmill to lose weight. I was on the treadmill to prepare for my next role. I didn't know when it was going to come, but I was going to. Actors have to remember that you have to be ready when called upon, because you never know, man. And by the time I walked into that audition, I was ready. I'd spent a few years really getting my together, and I think he could tell. But then I had to go backwards a little bit, because Maya was kind of where I used to be. She's getting better, but you know, whereas I was going to the beach and getting on a boogie board with my kid, Maya would go to the beach with a picnic basket and wine and cheese by herself and have a lovely day. But she was spending a lot of time alone, as I had. So I had to put on weight, which is bizarre because I spent so long getting in shape. But I did it because Maya needed to be softer and sedentary. She wasn't like California fit. And I wanted her to be very soft. And she didn't have a lot of energy. So there was a sort of a physical change that was really excellent. Man, I ate a lot of pancakes when I was there.
I love
a lot of pizza.
I love the back and forth of the art and the life that you're speaking about. It's really terrific in the sense that you can see what you had gone through, which I didn't know about, gone through in that performance, and then there's kind of you having to kind of go back and kind of work on that a little bit. It's a beautiful sort of give and take between art and life, isn't it?
Oh, yes, because I don't know what it is, but sometimes I would say 99% of the time, whatever job I'm doing is somehow reflective of my life at the time. Maybe it's just because I have an actory brain or something, but you know, or I'm attracted to roles that I go from the inside out, you know, that I identify with that character. But it is unusual that it happens for me that way. You know, not that when I was doing, you know, beating Jim Carrey in that movie. Right. That's not what I was doing in real life.
And the number 23. We'll get to that. And one last one, and that's you've just been asked a couple of seconds ago by someone off stage about that great scene that we just quoted earlier, where yourself and Paul Giamatti are sitting there, and there is a moment there that I'm sure that Alexander Payne, as a director, you know, wanted to make this scene this way, but there is a sense in that scene that like, he's listening to you and you just want to stay with you forever. Like you're wanting that character to stay right there on that porch with you, talking about wine. And it's sort of this beautiful sort of moment. It's part of what makes that movie so special. And in preparation for that scene, I'm wondering if the two of you, if you and Payne or you and Giamatti worked it through to kind of make sure that all those gentle beats were hit in the right way.
Well, he'd already seen me do that in the audition. And when we got there, the cast, we all kind of had some rehearsal periods, and for some reason, I don't know why he knew me so well, but after I did this rehearsal with Paul and that particular scene, Alexander was like, now I want you to put the script away. We're not going to film this for a long time. I don't want you to look at it. I don't want you to rehearse in the mirror. I want you to forget about it until we shoot it. And it's weeks from now. And I was like, oh, I mean, I must prepare. And he's like, it's already there. And I want you to stop thinking about it. So I think he knew that I was probably going to sit in my hotel room and practice and rehearse and overthink it. And And he was just wanted me to do what I already knew how to do.
Yeah.
So then, you know, the script would be there on my coffee table, and it would be like, you know, mocking me, like the script was like, and I would be kind of like, no, and so, but I followed his direction.
Mm-hmm.
And then when it came to the night we were shooting, I still, now the script is in my trailer and it's still mocking me. Mm-hmm. But I wasn't afraid, because at that point we were all so relaxed that it was almost easy. He sets your mind at ease, and that's why the performance in his movies are so good, because you get out of your own way, you get rid of all the actory chatter that's in your head, and so when that was the very, very end of the night, we were doing all the stuff with Sandra and Thomas that were going and having sex in the other room, and they would actually go in there and just make a lot of noise. It was so funny. God, they were funny. And so then at the very, very end of the night, I'm like, okay, here it comes. And I did it 3 times. But to me, it was a dialogue.
Right.
Like, this is the scene where Maya falls in love with Miles. Right. Because Miles is the Pinot grape. Yeah. He is the most delicate, the most underappreciated. He needs so much care. Mm-hmm. And this really appeals to her. Yeah. And then I say my part. And then Alexander, who sits directly right next to the camera all the time, and he said, I said, would you like me to do, and he said, I don't want to change anything, but I'd like you to do it again. Because I just would really like to hear it again.
Oh, wow.
You know, and he and Jim Taylor are the writers, and I thought, oh, yes, I would like to do it again. It's the last time I'll ever be able to. Right. And so then we finished, we wrapped, and Paul and I are like, I'm holding on to him, we're in a super creepy location, man. And so he's walking me back to the trailer, because there was somebody this weird guy in the woods, man. It was a weird guy that would drive around, and he had an axe, and it was I'm telling you, this is true. So I'm, you know, and he said, you think it was okay? And I go, yeah. Like, he goes, was that easy? And I go, I think it was. And he goes, yeah, it's weird. That's weird. It's strange. You know? And both of us are very suspicious as actors. Like, how could it be that we just did that amazing thing without having rehearsed it in a couple of months?
Right.
But that was the mindset he wanted us in. So it was really beautiful. And I felt certain. Very few times as an actor do you feel certain when you go home from work. Like, I nailed it. Right. I'm so satisfied, and I was good.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great. I love
and
that.
it was quite a thing for me at that point in my career that I knew that I was good.
Yeah.
So
sorry
about that.
No, that's beautiful. Absolutely. Oh, that's a beautiful remembrance. And I also, by the way, I love your Paul Giamatti imitation. It's very fun. That is also beautiful. One last sort of funny grace on it. For a long time, you kind of couldn't go, of course, to Northern California to do wine tasting because you'd get swamped. Of course, people would think it was like, oh, look at this. Here she is, and she's at a wine tasting thing, and you'd spend 45 minutes taking selfies with people, right? It would be a tricky thing.
Well, for a while, because that part of, they call it the valley. Yeah. It's not Napa. Yeah. It's the Santa Ynez Valley, which is right over the mountains from Santa Barbara. So it's a real easy trip, and that was a sanctuary for me before the movie. Yeah. And I could climb trees, and I didn't really know much about the wine there. Yeah. I had friends that lived there, and total hippies. They were awesome. Mm. And that was taken away because then after the movie, there were tour buses and there were, and you know, they're all very small winemakers, and I just have to say, they're such lovely people, and to them, these are family enterprises, and it really means a lot because there's an artistry to it. And so when people go and they get drunk, it hurts their feelings because they took so long to make this beautiful thing. And so, you know, one time when I went there was a busload, and there was a guy, you know, and they were like, "Are you chewing gum?" And they were probably on their 4th or 5th stop. Thank God they weren't driving. And the woman pouring was so patient. And she was like, "Well, and the notes are, you know, there's some blackberry," and she was trying to describe this wine that her family made. And he goes, "Yeah, it tastes like grape juice." And she sort of went, "Well, yes, it is made from grapes." And then they were like, "Ah," and I really understood, like, it had become a bit of a circus. I think that's over. Now they're just popular. And now they still get to make a lot of money. And that area there's sideways signs all over the place. Great. And so just for a couple of years, I couldn't go for a while. But now I you know, my friends are still there, and you know. That's
great. I just thank you so much for sharing that memory and that anecdote with us earlier. That was just so special. You mentioned the guy in the woods with the axe. That's a great segue to go to some of your fun genre work. Not that the guy in the axe is in any of these movies, but you have just as much fun in things like there's a sense of play that you have in films like The Hot Spot, which is a neo-noir. You mentioned the number 23 with Jim Carrey, which is a terrifically fun movie. You play essentially two sides of one woman in that film. It's a very trippy kind of edgy movie. Even Red Riding Hood with Gary Oldman and Amanda Seyfried. There's so much fun there. Candyman in '92. Doing genre films like that, there's a sense of play to them, I would imagine, that you can really kind of let loose and enjoy, right?
Well, yes, because it's like Halloween. Like you're really playing dress up. And you're reacting to a monster that's not there. You know, or an explosion when it's really just someone behind the camera throwing a bunch of plaster at you, you know, and some flickering lights that are supposed to be a fire, and you're like, "I'm on fire," you know. But it's so much fun. It's so much fun because it's only make-believe. Unfortunately, it's the hardest type of script to find that's really good. Because I love working in the horror genre, but they don't have good stories. You know, like, I think that's coming back a little bit now. I think Get Out is going to help that a lot. I haven't seen the
Quiet Place.
I haven't seen that yet, but now we're getting back into story, and that the stakes are higher. It's more scary. So I would have done more of that, but I probably just would have ended up a scream queen. But I suppose I am. I suppose I did enough of that where I can claim that. But but they're fun. They're really fun to do. There's lots of blood and
it's fun. I said almost like a kid. There's a sense of play to it that I like. Let's talk about a trio of great indie films that I really like that are so special. One is The Magic of Belle Isle, which was your reunion with Rob Reiner, and it co-stars Morgan Freeman, which is such a wonderful film. The Astronaut Farmer with Billy Bob Thornton and Bruce Willis, and Walter, which is a sort of 70s style comedy drama with sort of a spiritual edge to it. We've spoken about, you know, this is a film festival, a celebration of indie films, and indie films like that are so crucial to not just the lifeblood of the industry, but I would imagine to actors as well, to kind of be able to dive into these projects that are oftentimes you know, the dream projects of some filmmakers and kind of really go into them. Let's just talk about, just to start off with Magic of Belle Isle and reuniting with Rob and working with Morgan. It's such a beautiful film. What was your approach to that one and that character?
Oh, that's just one of the most beautiful scripts I ever read. If you haven't seen this movie, it's so poetic, and everybody loves Morgan Freeman, and I loved him, and I got to kiss him. And I think that was his first on-screen kiss.
Ah, that's great.
And I sort of sprung that one on him. It wasn't scripted. I just did it. But it was, you know, it's this beautiful movie about a really bitter man in a wheelchair who's a writer, and he just sort of wants to get old and die. Yeah. But then he moves next door to me in a lake house with my 3 very boisterous daughters. Mm-hmm. And my 10-year-old is kind of like, she was my scout. Mm-hmm. Yep. And she kind of invades his space. Mm-hmm. And she brings her piggy bank and says, I'm going to hire you because I want you to teach me what imagination is. And he's kind of, you just kind of see him wake up a little. And it's one of those great Rob Reiner movies where it's such a human story. And it's so beautiful to look at. And Rita Moreno was our cinematographer who just won her Emmy.
That's right.
And so it was this really extraordinary, and Reed had a baby on her hip, and she's like lighting things in the middle of the night. I mean, it was just a great summer on a lake on the border of New Jersey and New York. Yeah. And with these 3 little girls and Morgan Freeman singing Frank Sinatra all the time.
Oh, just so great.
And you can feel that when you watch it. Yeah. So, you know, and then they kind of buried it. They didn't give it a good release, and I felt really discouraged. Mm-hmm. I felt really, really bad about that one because I loved that movie so much. Yeah. And I know it's good. Yeah. And I think that was a really important film for everyone in it. Mm-hmm. And for Rob Reiner, I think this was the best thing he did since Stand By Me.
I agree.
And he felt that. Yeah. And then it just, one of the few movies he ever made that he didn't distribute. Mm-hmm. And I think that was kind of, but I don't know how all that, I don't know how all that stuff works. But if you get a chance, it's, you know, you can see it online, you can rent it. It'll make you happy. Yeah.
There's a scene on a porch with Virginia and Morgan, and there's a Beethoven sonata going, and I don't know if you're feeling any stress, that scene will just sort of just mellow you out. It's an amazing scene, so beautiful. But it speaks to the importance of independent films, and throughout your whole career, you've been a defender of them and a champion of them, and how important they are to the film industry and to actors and filmmakers alike, right?
Well, and also festivals like this festival in particular, its reputation precedes it because there is incredible support from everyone who lives there. There's local support here that you guys are amazing. Like what, and it's, you know, from the moment I arrived, it's like your family here, and they love film. Mm-hmm. And this is probably, for a lot of the movies, it will be the only time that you'll see it on the big screen the way the filmmakers intended. It used to be that if I was at a film festival, that movie would just disappear. Yeah. Because, you know, you didn't have Netflix or Hulu or iTunes or... Now, there's a home. Yeah. There's a place that you can sell your independent film. Yeah. But it starts with festivals. This little movie that I made is so important to the filmmakers. Yeah. And so when you know, and everybody loves movies at festival, you know, like you can just feel like everyone's going to love it all over the world, you know, because you guys are so great. But there is an interest and a support from your community. And for filmmakers of all ages in front of the camera and behind, you can't know how moved I am and other people are. I mean, just the producer, because nobody else from the film could come this time, and they're like, really? Oh my God, they liked the film, and I'm like, yes, they liked the film, you know, and they're like, oh my God, we did a good thing. And it's also the film is in black and white for those who haven't seen it, so they're worried it's a hard sell, and it's a very, you know, it's a very, very emotional story. Yeah. But for them far away and for the other actors in the movie, they thank you, and I thank you for giving us an audience.
And yes, absolutely. And we'll talk more about 1985 in just a minute, but you mentioned filmmakers of all ages, which I think is a great segue to talk about the film you produced with your mother, Elaine, called I Know a Woman Like That, which is terrific, and you guys should seek it out. It's on Netflix, and it features interviews with Lauren Hutton and Rita Moreno and Eartha Kitt and various women from all walks of life, famous and not famous, and it's kind of talking about the life of women from about 64 to 95, and as you said the other night to me, Virginia, it's not about how to stay young, but it's about how to be old. And it's a phenomenal documentary. Let's talk about how meaningful it was for you to do a film with your mom and how that project came about and what it represented for you.
Well, my mother is an extraordinary woman, and I wanted to know what made her a woman like that. I wanted to know why she always had all the candles on the cake on her birthday. And she was the only mom I knew that not only shared her age, but wasn't lying about it. And she just, you know, my mother, now she's in her 80s, and she just takes a bite out of life every day. And I was like, I want to know. And I said, you must direct this and interview like-minded women. And she, as you'll see in the film, she's like, I'm too busy. Yeah. I'm finishing a book, and I'm going to Paris, and I'm like, you know, she's always busy with some, and I have my work with the Actor Studio, and so I had to wait to hire my mother. I had to wait for my mother to become available.
Right, for her schedule to open up.
Yes, for her schedule to open up. And so we started to assemble. One woman led to another woman, to the painter who knew the sculptor, who knew the author. The first call was to Rita Moreno. And as I'd never met her, but I really idolize her. And I got her on the phone, and I sort of described that this was a movie about women in the upper decades of their lives at a time when the world sort of tells you to go away and get old. Yeah. And these women defiantly refuse, except the old part. They're like, yeah, I'm fine with that. I'm old. Yeah. And she just said, oh, yes. I remember this gasp, and I love that. I can't wait to talk to your mother. And so then that led to them meeting, and then we had a name. And then, but most of the women in the film are what we would call civilians. We have a few famous faces, but there are women from all walks of life and colors and creeds, and sometimes we talk to their lovers, who are sometimes married to them. And I was like, oh, we're going to talk about sex. Yeah. Wow. You know, I mean, it was really, but that wasn't something we were seeking. That was just something that was a part of the conversation of their lives. Yeah. And the through line with all of the women was curiosity. They had passion and curiosity. And all of them were still working. Yeah. So it was a really extraordinary experience over a few years. So then she'd be available again. Yeah. She's so busy. And we finally put it together. Yeah. It took a very long time. I know there was a distribution company too that I sold it to, and the guy actually said that he thought these old women talking about sex was disturbing, and could we cut that part out?
Crazy.
I'm like, you know, no. And so that it's, so that was about their lives and their passion, and some of our women have passed away since we finished this film. Yeah. But we finally sold it, so you can see it, and And it's very interesting.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Yeah. And you should see it. It's really phenomenal. This is a link about talking about bravery and passion and mother to daughter. I know that in the 60s, your mom, I had read, she sent a bunch of letters as she was changing her life. She'd kind of uprooted you and Michael, and she was changing things around her life. She wrote letters to the late, great Roger Ebert, and who later wrote about this in the 80s after you and Michael had been in movies. Right. And she sort of made that decision. I'm going to be an artist, or she said, I'm going to pursue this thing that I had always wanted to pursue. And that must have been, watching her doing that, and then obviously continuing with her now, such an inspiration for you, because just watching her have that bravery and that passion, right?
Yes, it was. Yeah, it was quite extraordinary, because it was some years after my parents divorced and we lived north of the city of Chicago. And she had a job that was, bringing in income. And she decided that she wanted to be a full-time writer. And I think I was probably 14. And she sat me down and she said, this is going to be really hard, but this is what I must do. And I don't want to do it unless you're on board. But we're not going to have any money. It's going to be a struggle. I'm going to be a freelance writer, which, and I thought, oh, Mom, of course, because I'm an actor, so I'll learn about the struggle. And I said in my naivete, and she did, and it was very, very hard. We really, really struggled, and but suddenly it was, by that time my brother was out the door, and so it was her and I against the world. And I was an artist, she was an artist, and I was waiting tables, and we found a way, and that lesson was invaluable, because she always said, you will have what you need. It was a message she felt that came from the universe, from God. You will have what you need, don't be afraid. And she was damn right. We made it. So.
I love that. Well, fear being, of course, one of those biggest things to get over. In terms of playing mothers, another really terrific performance, you play a mother in David O. Russell's Joy. And what you bring to that character, to Terry, there's so much there. Oh, she's terrific. You are Jennifer Lawrence's mother, Robert De Niro is your husband, and Terry is a woman who feels kind of safe and comfortable in her bed, watching soap operas. You and I talked about that the rehearsal process for it was something that Russell really enjoyed, but there was also
yes, he enjoyed it.
He enjoyed it. But it took a long time even to get Terry's look right. Let's talk about the creation of Terry as a character, because it's so memorable and you're so terrific in the film, and she gets stronger as the film goes on. But she's a very crucial counterpoint to Jennifer Lawrence's character, the title character of Joy. It took even a while to kind of get her look right.
This character is the opposite of my mother. And in this film, she's the opposite of her daughter. And so there was a lot of preparation. David does weeks of prep. I was there in the blizzards of Boston for a month before I even got a script.
Wow.
And he it's really fascinating and exciting as an actor, because usually I build my characters one block at a time, but David builds the characters. So you have all these endless wardrobe fittings, not knowing what your character is. But I'm like, well, I'm gonna go with this because he's amazing. And you somehow trust him. And that may have been misguided, but he works with the same people and the same crew over and over and over again. So I'm like, all right, they're okay with this. If De Niro is okay with this, I gotta be okay with this. So I would do these endless wardrobe. I think I went through 12 different wigs, all these different glasses, and and then he changed everything. So now I'm a different person. And I'm like, listen, you gotta give me something. Yeah. You gotta tell me what the story of her is, because I can help. And he gave me a little. But then when you're done, he kind of gets this crazed face, and he's like, that's it. That's her. And I'm like, yay. Who is she? You know? And so you kind of go, you're just in this complete creative land that is only David O. Russell. Yeah. And then it becomes a different thing once you're shooting, and he just cares. He cares so much. He wants to make sure that you're wearing the right shoes so your feet don't hurt. Oh. You know, I know there's a sort of a perception of David as, you know, being eccentric, to say the least. Yes. But he's so creative, and he knows exactly what he wants to shoot. Yeah. So there's an incredible amount of rehearsal, and I think it's a reason why the performances are always so good. Yeah. And it's nobody does what he does. So you kind of feel like you're in the land of Oz, and you don't know what's going to happen next, but man, it's going to be exciting. Yeah. So it was, I'd do it all again. Yeah. If I had to, except for the blizzard.
Except for the blizzard, yeah.
The snow, it was not, no.
Yeah. Well, it yields amazing.
It'd be better if we shot it here.
Right. Yeah, everything should be shot in Sarasota.
Florida loves my hair.
We'll take some questions in just a couple of minutes from everybody, but I have to talk about, and before we talk about 1985, about you gave a phenomenal and complex performance in the first 2 seasons of ABC's Designated Survivor. There's an elegant character arc and a very relevant political side to your character, Kimball Hookstratton, which is a great name. Kimball Hookstratton, great name. And she's a Hook, right? Kimball Hookstratton, and she's a rarity in television and in pop culture overall. So talk to us about, she is the speaker, a Republican Speaker of the House, who's a counterpoint to Kiefer Sutherland's character, who's the president after an attack leaves the government sort of in shambles. But as a woman on television, as a political creature on television, Kimball was something very unique, and we talked about this the other day, about how where she fit into the story and her arc, right? And that was special in many ways. Well, she was a composite of different women that I know, also my mother. But I feel like she was kind of a Republican Elizabeth Warren. Right. That kind of passion and fire. She was a patriot. Yeah. And she had a love of her country, and she knew more than the president. Right. Because he was a newbie. He's like, suddenly this guy ends up, everyone dies, and unbelievable as that might seem, in television we believe it. And suddenly Kiefer is, he's suddenly thrust into the Oval Office and has to rebuild the government. It was such a great idea. And the way that they wrote me is I wasn't a stereotype. I wasn't his enemy. Right. I was his adversary. And also because I knew more, I was there to help him to rebuild the country. And I thought that was such a great relationship. Yeah. And our characters disagreed on some really fundamental things. And it was just very exciting, and I wish that they'd bring her back. Well, maybe they will. This is a plea now. Yeah, no plans on that Kimball yet, but she's terrific, yeah, right? It was great, and yeah. I loved. I spent some time in Washington and before this recent election. Yeah. So I got to meet a lot of people who got along so much better than I actually thought they did. Yeah. I don't think that's the case anymore. Yeah. But at the time it was very, very exciting, and I learned so much. I felt so patriotic. Yeah. It's extraordinary to go to Washington. Yeah. And my mom had taken me there when I was a kid. I took my kid to see it, and now I was like in the Oval Office. Like I actually was
he wasn't there.
Right, yeah.
But I,
Yeah.
you know, I was actually in the White House.
Yeah.
And I felt so proud of the history of that building. And in the basement of the White House, there's the original doorway where they used to go in before the driveway and the lawn now. And there's still some charred places from when the White House was burned down. And you can touch that. And you can see the sandstone before they had to paint it white because the sandstone was too, that's why it's white, because it was too fragile. And I have a great love of history. So to touch that doorway and see where there's a pipe sticking out where there used to be a lantern, it was so moving to me. And it's, you know, for better or worse, we do have the best system. And it's going to work out. I really believe that. And it's, you know, we all warts and all. I mean, we argue, we debate. That's what we're made of. That's why we made a new country. So it was extraordinary to be there.
Yeah, and that was on the show. That is part of the message of Kimball and Kiefer Sutherland's character, one being a Democrat, one being a Republican. They do work out. She's almost a vice presidential choice at a certain point. It's a terrific arc. Like, here's to bringing back Kimball is what I would say. And then talking about history, let's talk about 1985, your new film that's playing here at the Sarasota Film Festival.
Oh, right.
No, segue around. No, because it premiered to acclaim last night, and it'll screen again on Sunday. And it's about a young man played by Corey Michael Smith in 1985, returning home to Texas to deal with his family. Talk to us about the film, because it represents a specific moment, and you had mentioned something to me about how you love that it ends on a first kiss for all the family strife that's inside of this drama, and sort of the beating heart that's, because it is about love ultimately. And let's talk about how the film affected you and the approach to it.
Well, I loved this mother, and you know, it's a young man who is coming home to see his conservative family and his little brother, and he knows that he's dying because in 1985, if you had AIDS, it was a death sentence. And his parents don't know that he's gay. He's had to move away in order to be who he is. And nobody can talk to each other because everyone is so different, and I'm sure, I would say almost everybody here had those moments with their mom and dad. Like, I know I did. You know, I love my dad. He's up there now. But my dad was a fireman, and he just couldn't, for the life of him, understand what I was doing, being an actor, and I didn't outgrow it. And I didn't understand him in a way. And so, but I knew he loved me. And in this story, Michael Chiklis plays this role. He's a blue-collar dad. He doesn't play him as a brute, or he's not mean. He's just desperately worried about his son, who's living a life that he can't even conceive of. It's so wrong and so sinful. But you know that he loves his son. And I think the mom in this story knows. She doesn't know he's sick. Pretty sure she knows he's gay. I'm pretty sure moms always know. Anybody that I know that is gay, their moms always knew. And so she's kind of trying to keep everyone together and get everyone to get along, but no one can really speak the truth to each other. And it's very emotional, but it is about family love, because no matter what, they love each other. And I think there is a path for families to still find one another. And I did with my father. Even, I told you, even when my father was like dying and he was the old soldier that he was. And he was kind of in and out, and he kind of was giving me this very curious look, and I was like, oh, I was waiting for another story. My dad was a great storyteller. It's his fault that I'm an actor. and he just kind of, and he said, I'm in my 50s, okay? I've made a success of myself. And he looks at me and he's like, how can you live that way? And the only thing I could think to say was, Dad, I have a pension. I mean, that was just no way to explain, but it was his great love for me and his inability to understand, and he was just afraid. Yeah. But I knew he was proud of me, but we're just so different. And so many people have that dilemma with family because there's a generational thing. You're always going to be different from mom and dad. So this movie isn't only about 1985 and this beautiful young man that we know is going to die, and it's going to probably not take that long. Because you didn't have to be sick to die suddenly. Once you got sick, that was it. But he can't tell them. And what a terrible thing. If you're different from your children, or you're different from your parents or your aunts and uncles, find a way to connect. Because what a terrible thing if families can't talk to each other. And we get so clumsy as human beings. You know, we make a mess of things, but there has to be a way. There has to be a way. And if you give them a chance, like, I kept bringing my dad to work with me. He was like, holy Christ. This is the land of fruits and nuts. You know what I mean? Like, but eventually, after years, that became funny.
Right.
That became a running joke. Yeah. And because I just kept bringing him with me through letters. I just kept talking to him, just kept sharing. And then eventually he would write his name, and after his name it said FOS, which meant Father of the Stars. Oh. And so and he would make up so many stories that weren't true. Like I was on this movie with, I'll name drop because it's a great story, but I got flown home from work one day by Harrison Ford in a little tiny plane. Yeah. So that wasn't enough for my dad. I was like, Dad, you're not going to believe what happened. Oh, my God. And I was really cool about it, but, it was Harrison Ford, and he was flying. And so he added to the story that Harrison flew me to Paris. and just for dinner. And I said, you know, Dad, it's a pretty great story that we were just in Canada and it was a 15-minute flight. Like, it's still a really cool story. He was like, yeah, but they believe it. Great storyteller he was. So what I'm saying is that that's what I see this mother as in this movie. I see her as eventually bringing that family together, even though I know it's really sad, this movie, you guys.
No, but it's really powerful, and it's so beautiful and so moving. I can't speak enough of it. If anybody has any questions, shoot up a hand. Yes, right there in the back.
Yeah, back to Sideways for just a minute. At the time it came out, I was single and I was internet dating, and it was a great date movie. And I make no exaggeration when I say I've seen it 15 times.
You had a lot of dates. No, not a clue. I thought it would be critically acclaimed because of Alexander and Jim Taylor, because of their beautiful script. I didn't know the script was funny. I thought it was more like about Schmidt until I saw Thomas and Paul and what an amazing duo they were. So I thought it would get some good notices and it would be okay, but, you know, Sandra and I, we were just kind of like the supporting characters. And even as the film started building this incredible momentum, and people started talking about me, and I thought, oh, well, Paul and Thomas are going to get, you know, they're starting to get a lot of attention. And I don't read reviews, because I got a lot of really bad ones, and, you know, it hurts your feelings a little, so I just made a rule. And Alexander, at one point when this thing had become phenomenal, he said, sit down. And he was like, I'm going to read this review. And I go, oh, you know, I mean, if you believe the good ones, you got it. And he was like, I don't care. You're going to listen to this entire review. You're not going to read it, but I am. And I just was a deer in headlights. I couldn't believe that someone was saying these things about such a simple, very quiet performance. And then the film started winning awards, and all of us were together, and we really loved each other like a family. So wherever we went, we were in this cluster, and we were around all these super famous people. You know, there was the Scorsese table and the Ray table and, you know, the little children table. Like, it was just all, or maybe that was the next year. No, I think it was that year. But, you know, and it was just an extraordinary experience, and it was so much fun. So I thought, this is once in a lifetime. There'll never be a time, I'll get back there, but there'll never be a time when I would be overwhelmingly supported. There'll never be a time when everyone likes me in the movie. That's a once in a lifetimer. So I decided very, very early on in that experience, as things started to turn around, that I was gonna drink it in. And it was my dream since I was a little girl. And there I was, getting out of a limo at the Oscars. And I got out, and I looked up, and there were people on the tops of buildings. And I saw that long magic carpet, and I stood there, and I closed my eyes, and I promise you this is true. And I just took a deep breath, and I stood there for a while listening to the sound of it. I gathered myself together, and I was like, let's do this. And I didn't, because I was quite certain I wasn't going to win. I didn't have the kind of pressure. I was very, very certain that Cate Blanchett was going to win, that, positive 100%. So I didn't feel the pressure, because everything was done. All the shows were done, all the awards things were done. But that carpet in that dress with those people that I loved, and I took a lot of actors on my shoulders, all the actors who struggle and don't get that experience and don't get attention and don't get work and struggle for years and years and years because they believe in their dream. All those actors were walking onto this red carpet with me. So it was extraordinary. That was too long, that story.
No,
sorry.
it was perfect. No.
I was getting very romantic about that.
Yeah, right there, ma'am. Yes, good.
What kind of distribution does 1985 have?
It does not yet. I know that they've had some offers, but I think that they want to bring it to festivals, and they're creating a nice little buzz, bigger buzz after here. But I know they've got 3 more festivals they're going to after this. So they're gonna let it live the festival life and expose it to a lot of people and get some good press. But I have no doubt, I think it'll do quite well. Yeah.
To wrap up, you've done so much, Virginia. Is there a type of film or a type of character you've never played that you would love to play? Someone or something, or some era, anything like that?
Well, I'd really like to play a villain. But I mean,
Yeah.
like a super villain.
Right.
Okay? and because when I played villainous characters when I was a very young person, I really didn't understand the power of that.
Yeah.
And you know, Javier Bardem took my role in the Bond movie. Like, then he dyed his hair blonde. And it was thanks, Javier. I was unavailable.
Right.
But I would like to play a villain like that's that maniacal,
Yeah.
where it's so much fun
Right.
to take over the world. You know, like that was a very bad reading, but do you know what I mean? Like to have that kind of, you know, where the audience just loves that you're super bad.
Yeah.
You know, like
Yeah.
where you kind of root for the villain.
right.
I want to play one of those.
That's right.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so fun. Well, you have certainly taken over Sarasota. Ladies and gentlemen, Career Achievement Award recipient and extraordinary Virginia Madsen. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for coming.